Welcome back to DCS Debrief. Thanks very much for coming back. We'll start this video on basic BFM flows with the standard disclaimer. I'm not a fighter pilot. These presentations are not intended to be authoritative, but information inferred from my own experience in real aviation where it's relevant, directly referenced official but open source literature, and anecdotal information from former fighter pilots who I happen to know. It's presented for critique and to add to the overall body of information on the topic of air combat in simulation games like DCS, in the hope that it'll be challenged and generate a discussion involving people who know better than I do. Like many tactics, techniques and procedures, application differs in key areas between the game and real life, and as such these presentations are only really relevant in the game. I hope you enjoy it. So the fundamentals video explained the basics of one circle and two circle fights. However, these fights don't always present in an intuitive fashion, and it's vital to be able to identify them and understand how their general differences significantly impact BFM conduct and the decisions you make on how you conduct the fight. The aim of this video is to explain the differences between the two basic BFM flows. To get the most out of this presentation, you'll need to know the nomenclature from the fundamentals video, and this video will expand on that basic knowledge. From the turning video, remember that turn rate and radius are dependent upon very different conditions, as this is a cornerstone of understanding the pros and cons of basic BFM flows. Bear in mind also that fighters cannot maintain their maximum load factor without bleeding energy, and so thrust-to-weight ratio is a major factor in whether a fighter can maintain a high turn rate, whereas geometry alone governs radius, so reducing it is dependent upon the aircraft being controllable at low speed. By the end of this video, you'll understand the difference between the two basic BFM flows, you'll understand how each flow suits different approaches from different types of aircraft, and you'll understand the importance of geometry in resolving basic BFM problems. This video will deal only with geometry, definitions and considerations arising from basic BFM flows without regard to defeating the bandit. This will be covered in later videos, and this will be the last video in this part of the series before we go into how to actually conduct BFM. So well done for your patience. So we've got all the definitions that we need to talk on this subject already. I'm going to dive straight in and talk about one circle fight. So one circle fights are so named because two aircraft adopting this flow at the merge will describe one circle. If the fighter and the bandit both turn in the same direction, then by the time they merge again on the other side of the circle, they will have completed between them one circle. However, the fundamental defining characteristic is a nose-to-nose aircraft orientation, because as the fight continues, after multiple turns, the fighter and the bandit will have described multiple circles. For this reason, a one-circle fight is also known as a nose-to-nose fight. This type of fight favours an aircraft with a smaller turn radius, which might be able to reverse quickly to gain angles, and for this reason a one-circle fight is also known as a radius fight. A fighter able to turn inside a bandit who is going for the maximum turn rate can gain angles rapidly. For this reason, a one-circle fight is also known as an angles fight, and this type of fight suits aircraft that can operate at high angle of attack or low speed for a small radius. However, a one-circle flow demands lower airspeed, so the fighter's potential to use the vertical might be limited. Having said that, a low thrust-to-weight ratio fighter may achieve best rate at a radius inside a more powerful bandit, albeit at a lower overall rate, and if the bandit can be lured below their best sustained rate speed, an angles fighter might be able to keep the fight flat and win an advantage that way. However, it's important to note that radius fights don't just mean go the slowest and turn inside the bandit. For example, the Hornet is an excellent angles fighter that can produce tight turns at as little as 140 knots. That said, the roll rate at this speed is very slow, and the nose authority might be limited, with follow-on options severely constrained. Bear in mind also that eventually you will fight in an environment where you can't guarantee it will just be you and one other bandit, so bleeding down to such a low energy state might be even more risky. Two-circle fights are so named because two aircraft adopting this flow at the merge will describe two circles. However, the fundamental defining characteristic is again nose-tail orientation, so once the fight has collapsed to a point where the two aircraft are pursuing one another around a single circle, it is still a two-circle fight. For this reason, a two-circle fight is also known as a nose-to-tail fight. Two-circle geometry favours aircraft with high turn rates, as with aircraft orientated nose to tail, an angular advantage will be yielded to the fastest to complete the turn. For this reason, a two-circle fight is also known as a rate fight or a rate war. As we saw in the video on turning, sustaining high turn rates depends entirely on maintaining the better energy package. This, in turn, demands the thrust necessary to overcome high induced drag, and for this reason a two-circle fight is also known as an energy fight. This type of fight suits high thrust-to-weight ratio fighters with high turn rates at high speed and high G. Design constraints make it difficult to design a high thrust-to-weight fighter that will hold a rate and a radius advantage, so legacy energy fighters are usually less at home in one-circle flows. This is changing with modern fighters with high levels of computer-augmented stability, and in any case, the higher speeds involved in two-circle engagements make vertical manoeuvring relatively easy, and this in turn can be used to reduce radius, the ultimate example of this being a vertical roll. However, high AOA regimes will rapidly bleed energy from fighters optimized for two-circle, and even relatively modern high thrust-to-weight ratio fighters may begin to suffer if they are pinned into this corner of the envelope. The bottom line is that two-circle flow doesn't just mean high speed or corner and pull. Energy must be managed. So let's talk about misaligned turn circles. Misaligned turn circles is another concept that it is vital to understand if you are to fully grasp how to conserve energy, and it is wholly the preserve of two-circle geometry. Two-circle fights rarely involve two aircraft flying around precisely co-located posts, and any offset in position generates a phenomenon called misaligned turn circles. A fighter with a bandit ahead at moderate angle off nose and aspect will be in lag. As the turn progresses, aspect will build as angle off nose reduces, and then angle off nose will build again as aspect reduces. Finally, aspect and angle off nose will resolve briefly within acceptable values before the cycle resets. This all means that a fighter that has gained an offensive position will eventually be granted a shot opportunity purely by geometry alone. And if a shot isn't possible, then the aggressor will at least have a psychological advantage that could lead less experienced defenders to make a critical error. So the two BFM flows are the simplest distillation of all the possible maneuvering options in BFM. Like everything else, knowing what kind of fight you are in will not guarantee you a win, even if you're in a fighter suited to that flow, but it is a vital component in understanding what strengths and weaknesses are held by you and which ones by the bandit. In future videos, we'll look at ways to influence the fight to position yourself in the most advantageous position possible. Hopefully you're now getting to understand that BFM is a lot more than having the best rate or the best low-speed manoeuvrability. In the next few videos, we'll start to cover the specifics of offensive BFM at a level that allows you to understand how your fights are progressing, and most importantly allows you to correctly identify the mistakes that you and your opponent are making, because only once we understand the mistakes can we work on a fix. From there we'll look at some of the setups that you can use to efficiently generate the geometry necessary to practice technique and be able to experiment with your own technique. In the meantime, please like the video if you found it useful, and consider subscribing if you want to see more. Then go and practice the basics, and I'll see you next time for Offensive BFM Fundamentals.